In trucking, every minute counts. That's why QuickQ delivers smart, secure payment solutions designed to keep your fleet moving. From our innovative SmartQ RFID system that stops fraud at the pump, to our factoring company fuel card programs that help fleets get fast, reliable access to funds and fuel discounts, QuickQ simplifies your payments and keeps your cash flowing. And it all comes backed by customer service that's second to none. Make it simple, make it secure, make it QuickQ. Visit quickq.com to learn more.
Welcome to Loaded and Rolling. I'm your host, Thomas Wasson, and today we're going to be talking about sustainability. We're going to be having the folks at Geotab on. They've been doing a lot of stuff helping fleets in terms of charge monitoring, maintenance, reducing idling. And so for a lot of folks in trucking, sustainability go hand in hand, because if your drivers are continuing to idle your truck, you're not only killing the environment, but also your profit margins, which you want to reduce. There's a lot of cool stuff as well with the capabilities of EVs, and one of the big questions is, how do you charge them? When's the best time to charge them? And where are you going to charge them? So there's a lot of cool stuff that technology providers are doing to help these fleets. And so we're going to be talking with Charlotte Argue, Senior Manager of Sustainability Mobility at Geotab. She's going to tell us a little bit about the stuff that they have been working on. And Charlotte, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Before we dive in, tell us a little about yourself.
Thanks, Thomas. Yeah, great to be here. So, as I say, I'm Senior Manager of Sustainable Mobility at Geotab. What does that mean? That means I'm really focused on how we can leverage data insights to help advance efficiency and reduce emissions in fleets. So I work across our various teams to look at how we can bring some of those insights out to the industry at large, and then also how our customers are engaging with our solutions to help them meet their own objectives. Maybe a little bit about Geotab. So we're a global leader in connected vehicle and asset solutions. We've been around for 25 years now. This is our 25th year being in business, and we have over 50,000 customers with 4.7 million vehicles or so connected to our system. So we have a lot of interest and growing interest in the telematics industry in general. And I think what we're seeing is telematics just becoming an integral part of fleet management. So they're turning to us to help them with a number of different areas across their business. So it's not just about efficiency and sustainability. It's also about meeting their productivity or increasing their optimization of their assets and meeting safety goals and meeting compliance goals. So efficiency and sustainability is one component of kind of a holistic fleet management approach.
When I'm thinking of the idling, like one of the things when I managed fleets was that my drivers would constantly idle at truck stops. And then I'd ask them about it and like, well, I need like my air conditioning to work and stuff. And so when we're thinking of like calculating the idling of like how many gallons am I wasted for idling, is there something within the sustainability where there's kind of like a recommended amount of idling that I can get? Or is it more based on like the states where like if I'm in California, they may have restrictions more than like Tennessee or something? We're looking at that idling question.
Yeah, so idling is for fleets who are looking at their idling, they can set what their targets are. So we have what's called rules and notifications and exception reporting. And so a fleet operator can go in and say, well, you know what, I'm okay with a little bit more idling for my heavy trucks compared to my light cars or vans. And so they can set different requirements or bench lines for the different vehicles in their fleet. We look at kind of necessary idling is a little bit different than preventable idling. And so it's important to understand, idling because you're stuck in traffic is going to look a lot different than if you're just parked at one site and idling because you're using the auxiliary loads or the air conditioning of your truck. But what we do is we take that idling and we look at the preventable idling and we put a cost to that. So we look at how much fuel was consumed while those vehicles were idling, and we turn that into both the fuel impact of that, the cost of that fuel, and also the emissions that were burned unnecessarily because of that idling. And so what fleets can do when they're looking at their idling report is by flagging the areas of high ratio of preventable idling compared to not, then they can think about, what kind of actions. Is it about driver training? Is it just one or two drivers, or is it across the board? And we need to look at a larger initiative to really tackle of those vehicles and, look at why drivers are driving. And so that's where data can help define what type of programs or initiatives they should be investing in. And actually, I can give a really good example. So California Freight, they're a freight logistics company. They do a lot of heavy long haul. They brought in telematics, and idling wasn't really top of mind for them when they were using telematics. They were looking at other things. But because they put in telematics, we were able to have surfaced the report on their preventable idling, and they discovered that they were spending about $100,000 per month on fuel just from idling. And so, they were able to leverage that and address it in just a few targeted actions. So what they did was they brought in driver training, they brought in some real-time notifications and have feedback back to the drivers. But then they saw that a lot of the idling was due to their sleeper trucks. So, the drivers are sitting in their sleeper trucks and they're keeping the engines on. And so that gave them the business case to invest in auxiliary power units so that they could put those in the sleeper trucks. And by doing those three things, they reduced their idling costs from $100,000 a month to $41,000 a month. So that's almost 60% reduction in those costs. And then they're able to take that savings and then reinvest it in other areas of their fleet. So it was just a huge eye-opener for them, and just goes to show, there's a lot of, a fleet operator, fleet director, they know their fleets, they know their vehicles, but oftentimes we all have assumptions around where the opportunities are or how vehicles are performing, but it's not until you actually get the data in your hands and turn that data into useful insights that you can actually see some of these big changes and improvements.
I wonder as well, when we're looking at the telematics game, I've spoken with safety telematics companies for driver safety. It's kind of 80-20. You get that 20% that causes 80% of the headaches. When we're looking at idling and we're looking at some of this data, even like preventative maintenance and stuff, is there any surprising things for some of these fleets? Was it kind of like across the board there was some big serious issues, or was it concentrated in that one driver who loves to run their air fryer, their Xbox, and their portable fridge all at the same time while also idling the truck and not doing a pre-trip ever?
Fleets are so varied, so it's really hard to just paint like a single picture on where the improvement and opportunities are. I would say, idling is just one area, and what we've seen is it's usually not just a single driver. So for the California Freight example, that was across the board, and that's why the auxiliary power units was really helping, because it was about comfort and safety for the drivers too. So you have to really put yourself in their shoes on why this behavior is happening, and not just turn around and say blame them and say, okay, you have to change it and we're not going to give you the tools to do so. But for some fleets, idling isn't that big an issue, and the opportunities for them to improve or reduce their fuel use and improve their efficiency might be more around route optimization. And so looking at the current routes, how those vehicles are being used today, and making some tweaks on, well, maybe this vehicle doesn't need to be dispatched over here if another vehicle can do that, is already in that area. And now, we would have never been able to do this with the systems that we have today, right? Without GPS, without AI, without the software tools that we have, like compared to even 10 years ago, the systems that can kind of automate all these decisions around, how do you dispatch your vehicles? Where are they going? You can prioritize efficiency. You can prioritize, let's take those routes that aren't congested today or right now and use real-time information to kind of feed into your fleet systems. So yeah, there's different ways that the data can identify what makes most sense for that particular fleet. And you never know where you should invest until you actually look at where those inefficiencies are.
Well, let's talk a little bit about preventative maintenance so we can circle back to the route optimization, a passion project of mine from my network design days. But for preventative maintenance, this stuff is really cool because it kind of ties into the not only sustainability, but a bunch of other factors for fleets. When we're talking about this preventative maintenance, what are some of the things that fleets are looking at? Is it I need to change my PM cycles? Or is it maybe this truck can go a little bit longer? Or maybe this truck in one part of the country is doing worse than others? For folks who are unfamiliar with how fleets are tackling this, what are some of the big trends you see that Geotab is helping folks in the preventative maintenance side?
Yeah, what we're seeing is kind of a move from preventative maintenance to predictive maintenance. And so what does that mean? That means you're catching things before they happen. And, preventive maintenance has always been, getting the ratio right between preventative, like spending money on maintenance to prevent, repairs, and then that ratio of repairs and maintenance that cause from, downtime and all of that. And with AI tools, we can now be even smarter about what needs to happen when. And so what we're able to do is we can use machine learning from hundreds of thousands of vehicle data points. So think about all the sensors and points from vehicles across the board. And we can analyze it to pick out patterns. And this happens automatedly, pick out patterns that have led to different failures. And then we can apply that learning so that it will automatically alert a fleet manager of a potential failure based on their truck, based on the truck type, and based on the signal sensors that's coming off that vehicle. This is all the software can say, oh, wait a minute, we've seen this before. This has a X% chance of failing within the next month or 4 weeks or whatever have you. And then that will trigger a maintenance order. And this is all automated. So it can trigger a maintenance order. It can prioritize that order or the alert based on the urgency and that failure risk that it's calculated. So there's a whole bunch of benefits for fleet operators to leverage this type of predictive maintenance software, and that includes you're going to have less vehicles with downtime. You're going to have fewer emergency repairs, potentially avoided collisions. But then from kind of the sustainability perspective, well, you can extend that life of that vehicle better. You can even prevent prematurely replacing parts, because before maybe they just had it as a schedule to replace a part. With the preventative maintenance program, well, if that part doesn't need changing off, if you can hold it on for another year, then you're saving those parts, moving and cycling through the system. So yeah, I think there's a lot of benefit on what we're seeing, and pretty exciting to see what's going to come, because this is still early days.
I think that's fun because you kind of get like a health report of the fleet. Because one of the cool things of the predictive is the make and model with such a large data set that you're collecting from all the customers and stuff. You're able to provide that. Is that something where are customers utilizing it in like a KPI, or is it so much more sophisticated like the automation aspect where I don't need to meet once a week and see like how healthy my fleet is with a scorecard? Maybe it's just handling all that to begin with, and I'm just looking at, why are all these POs happening for this specific part? How are fleets kind of tackling it? Just like meet up once a week and look at it, or is it more real time daily?
It's a bit of both. Yeah, it's you still need that kind of hands-on. You need that expertise component to it. So you need the person behind it, and they may be looking for other things that the system or the software is not looking for yet. But ideally, you're getting a lot of this automated. So instead of waiting for setting up a monthly report, if something happens, you're getting that real-time feedback. So yeah, I would say it's a little bit of both, and it also depends on kind of the severity of the repairs or what's needed in terms of maintenance as well, on how the cycle of how that information is kind of surfaced up to ultimately the decision maker.
And one of the cool things you mentioned was EV charge monitoring, which I think is cool. A lot of, especially in states like California, where there's a substantial population of EVs and they're developing and building charging infrastructure. Talk a little bit about how folks like Geotab are helping, because I can only imagine, instead of when's the right time to fuel or when to idle, an EV brings a whole new set of things I need to take into consideration to kind of get the most bang for my buck.
Yeah, yeah. Getting the most bang for your buck is kind of the key with EVs. So one of the biggest benefits, of course, the emissions reductions and fuel reduction as well, but you don't get the ROI if those vehicles are being used. So with EVs, we see some fleets being a little bit more conservative on where they're deploying their electric vehicles. And the higher they can get that utilization and the more of that battery pack that they're able to use, the more benefit they get from, less fuel use in other parts of their fleet. So they can kind of offset that gas or diesel that would have otherwise been needed. And what we're seeing with EV deployments is oftentimes with kind of those early pilots, fleets would opt to do a 1-to-1 ratio of charging station to vehicles. And so you don't really have to think too much about, what vehicle needs to be charged, because the vehicle comes back to its depot and the driver just plugs it into its dedicated charger. What we're seeing now more and more is fleets opting to, that's just not scalable in a lot of fleet contexts. So we're seeing one charger to many vehicles. And so now the decision has to be, well, which vehicles I need to know that my EVs are going to be ready when they need to be for their next trip or their next job. And so tying in the real-time state of charge, tied in where those vehicles are. So what vehicles are at my depot, which ones need to be plugged in, and which ones need to be prioritized. If they're charging, how long is it going to be before they're fully charged? Which vehicle is up in queue next. So all that information, we've surfaced that. It's called the EV Charge Monitoring Report, and it provides essentially like a screenshot or a dashboard for those people who are managing a depot and managing the chargers at a site, so they can not have to worry about whether their vehicles are going to be ready, and they can again set up automated notifications if a vehicle isn't charging it should be charging, or if it's not going to be ready by the time it needs to be. This just helps increase the utilization of the vehicles, and it also helps prevent downtime for, an example of a driver forgetting to plug in or something like that.
And I think it's got to be a tough situation trying to figure out the day-to-day of EV fleet ops, because if you're thinking like slip seat, if you're running it and then one driver gets off, the other driver takes over. I'm assuming the reason it's like a 4-to-1 ratio now is because you're going to have one quick charging, but you need to keep cycling or you can't make any money if it drives, it stops, it drives, it stops. So I'm assuming it makes it more difficult to try and get that ROI, so you need the tech to help you figure out when the best time to plan this chaotic charging events happens.
Yeah, and honestly, I would say the data starts before the stations are even in the ground or the vehicles are deployed, because right-sizing the charging is going to be very important as well to optimize those vehicles. And what I mean by that is, in some cases, those the fleet vehicles are parked over 10 hours or 12 hours overnight. Maybe they're not being used, they won't need opportunity charging during the day, and so they can get away with a lower power charger, maybe even in some cases level 2 chargers instead of DC fast chargers, which is going to save the fleet a lot of money if they can find those depots that they can get away with a lower power charger. And so looking at your own vehicle utilization, the duty cycles, modeling how much power those vehicles are going to need can help inform the charging strategy in the first place. And then once the vehicles are deployed and once the charging is out there, then using that data in real time to help. And as you say, slip seats looks a lot different than dedicated trucks or door-to-door delivery, like they're all going to be different, and how to optimize the charging schedules is going to depend on the relationship between the dwell time of that vehicle when it's at its home base, whether or not it might be charging off-site at customer site or something, and how much time window that has to charge when it is dwelling. Because ideally, you're just charging when the vehicle's stopped anyway.
And so we've got our preventative maintenance figured out. We have our charge cycles locked in. They're not idling and wasting fuel. Now we're looking at route optimization. So we're ready to haul some stuff. When we're looking at the types of optimization, what are some of the big things these companies are looking at with the telematics? Back when I did dispatching in fleet ops, deadhead was a number, but we didn't really think about the differences. Usually, sometimes you'd have a router that helped, but a lot of times it was very rudimentary in terms of empty miles. But now with the technology, tell us a little bit about how you can actually go beyond just that empty number, and you can try to help figure out the right route to choose. Because I feel like it's a really complicated question depending upon who you ask.
Yeah, and there's different levels of that. So you can think of as a person, as your own driver. If you're using Google Maps, that's one example of real-time routing that may take into consideration the current traffic conditions, right? And so I'm finding, and it depends on what your priority is. Is it time? So you're trying to avoid congestion, for example, or is it overall cost? In which case you want to burn less fuel, and maybe there's a trade-off between time or like how quickly you can get there, or how long that route is. In the case of fleets, like they can leverage route optimization in that way, from like one driver to another driver. Every segment and every type of fleet is going to be different on whether or not they're leveraging various dispatch software and dispatch solutions. So they might have a delivery schedule they have to keep, and so that's their priority over, say, emissions or fuel or costs. One approach that Geotab has taken with our route optimization is we can take a look at kind of the historic routes and data for a region or fleet at large, and then identify some of the opportunities to improve efficiency as a whole. So that's more around reallocating routes and modifying how those vehicles are dispatched from kind of a broader scale. And then that, again, you can prioritize different things. You can prioritize the optimization, efficiency, costs, emissions, and sometimes there's a trade-off. Oftentimes those come hand in hand.
Perfect. And, it was really good conversation as well, especially for fleets who may not be considering a lot of these options. I know from my personal experience, I got so busy, I didn't even consider the thought of idling until I wasted all my gas and the trucks clogged their DEF filters because they did not get up to speed. So it's one of those things, being proactive and having folks like Geotab, always amazing information. If folks want to learn more and get in touch, read about the Geotab Sustainability Center, what's the best way to get more information?
Yeah, so we have a lot of information just on our website, but I recommend just contacting us. We have a sustainability team that's looking at a lot of different aspects, from electrification to routing to idling and right sizing. So we have a team that can kind of sit with the fleet and look at their data and identify some opportunities if they're stuck. Info@geotab.com is a great way. Or for current customers, they also have the reseller partners that they can talk to as well.
Perfect. Charlotte, really do appreciate your time. That's going to be a wrap for this episode. If you're just joining us, this will be on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, wherever you sign up for your podcast. While you're at it, sign up for the Loaded and Rolling newsletter. FreightWaves.com/loaded and rolling goes out Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. And finally, coming up on May 14th, there is the Freight Fraud Symposium. We'll throw up the graphic there in Dallas, Texas. One-day event. You want to sign up for it. Learn about freight fraud. That's a wrap for this episode, folks. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you again next week.